Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. And now,
cash, scratch, green. Benjamins, assets, income.
Welcome to this episode of Emma Knows Money. I am your host, certified financial planner, Emma Foulkes, and I am so glad to have here today Jeff Patterson with the United States Small Business Administration. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thanks for having me, Emma. Sure.
Thank you for being here. I can imagine you are pretty busy right now, aren't you?
It's been a challenging couple of weeks because of all the systems problems and such as that. But yeah, so it's been kind of busy.
Are you part of like the senior management, or what's your role within the SBA?
Yeah, so the Georgia District Office, we take care of the entire state and state of Georgia, and then we kind of divide the house into two parts. One part helps our small businesses gain contracts and do business with the federal government, state agencies, those kind of folks. And then the other half of the house takes care of lending and educating borrowers and lenders on lending products, and then on economic development stuff. That's a technical term, isn't it?
Yes.
But that's my world. So I handle the lending and the economic development side of the house. So.
You know, I had no idea that the SBA lent money directly. I thought that it always had to go through a bank. So I was kind of shocked to hear that the SBA would be, sending out money to business owners.
You're exactly right. And the only time we do that is if there's a natural disaster. And because most of those happen during a certain season or time, or maybe we don't have the wildfires they do in California here in Georgia, you don't really hear a lot about that. But we do have a whole separate arm of the Small Business Administration that handles just direct lending in the case there is a disaster. Of course, a pandemic meets that criteria, and Georgia was one of the first maybe 5 or 6 states, based on the proactive nature of stance of the governor, to sign up for that. So two things. There's two parts of the equation. Basically, there has to be a national disaster, and President Trump basically said the entire nation was in that state, and then the governor has to do, in broad terms, some paperwork to qualify the states for that, or the counties that are impacted. Basically, the governor said every county in our state qualified for that. So that's how we got in the game. It's the only time it is the direct lending, and it's done that way to get people in need the fastest help, and but that's handled by a whole different organization inside SBA that I don't really have access to, or can't see their systems. So that's been a little bit of a challenge on our side, but they do make direct loans. That's a long-winded answer. Yes.
Yes, and I'm gonna challenge you on the word fast. Because I'm going to challenge you on the word fast, because I'm here on Main Street and I've been talking to CPAs for the last 3 weeks, and their clients are calling them freaked out.
Yeah,
freaked out.
Probably should delete that verbiage from this cast or whatever. But
yeah,
so it is. There's a lot of. So first of all, the systems were taxed, the people were taxed. There's just a lot of, nobody even anticipated the volume that was going to happen. So the systems were down for a period of time on the disaster side. They got those back up and running. I think just based on the sheer volume, it was overwhelming to process all the applications, because what I've been told is there's not an algorithm out there just making the decision on these. It's an actual human being that's looking at the application, the information the borrower put in to the system, and there's they're supposed to be laying eyeballs on it, and so that kind of probably slows it down. But yeah, there's been an execution problem, I guess, with all of this really, because again, the leadership from DC basically describes it as building the plane as we're going down the runway.
Yes.
So it's okay. So you got me on the fast. But the good news is there are checks being deployed now. I've actually had personal calls where folks are actually getting the money that had called in before, back when this first started. So yeah. The good news is checks are flowing, and applications, even though the portal is shut and the money ran out, they're still processing applications. So I know it's frustrating to try to figure out where you are in the system or in the process, but they tell us that they're still processing. Folks are still getting emails, and checks are still being funded. So
yeah, I know people are receiving their checks. They're not always sure which check they're receiving because they're not receiving emails from the Small Business Administration identifying what was what. I think that may be for the first batch that may have come out, but that's all.
Well, that's so far. Yeah. So while we're on the subject, basically, and again, I'm on this side of the house, right? So I have to call the 800 number to find out as well. I don't have access to their systems, as we said. So again, I have to call and let me just give you the number. It's 800-659-2955 for the folks that really, obviously.
You said 800? Can you repeat the number one more time?
Sure. 800-659-2955. That's on the disaster side. And what we've been told is they've beefed up, they've hired a call center folks, they've trained people, they've hired people to try to meet the demand and the sheer volume of paperwork and process that I don't think anybody could see coming. So
yeah, when I was on the site, I saw that they were hiring remote workers to help deal with it, and I was thinking, great, at least some people get a job with the SBA. There's going to be a lot of people are overwhelmed right now. It's not just the SBA. Lots of companies weren't anticipating the influx of business or clients or customers or calls that they would be getting. So a lot of people have to ramp up really fast, and some have to, unfortunately, possibly slow down, which is, one of my next questions has to do with the EIDL program.
Okay.
I talk to my clients, and a lot of them, there's a lot of misinformation out there.
That is correct.
You have CPAs giving some types of advice. You have bankers giving some types of advice. You have, your financial planners, financial advisors giving advice, and sometimes they don't all add up to the same thing. So I wanted to just clarify for myself, for my viewers and listeners, and for my own clients, for the EIDL program, if you are a business owner, if you run a private nonprofit, if you're a homeowner or a renter, should you apply for the EIDL program?
So the short answer is yes, because again, somebody on the other side is supposed to look at this and decide if, well, maybe you don't really fit here or there. So the short answer, and what we've been telling folks, is put it in. I think one of your questions came up about property rentals and things of that nature really don't have an EIN. The answer there is put in your Social Security. So put in your Social Security number and put in as much information as you can and apply. That's what we've been telling folks.
All right. Well, here's my curveball. Okay. So
okay.
let's say, and like a lot of the clients that I do have, a lot of people that I know, they are small business owners, but they are sole proprietors. Okay. Sometimes they may not even have an LLC or an EIN number separate for their business, but right. They also have rental properties. How do they apply for EIDL?
So again, go through the portal, go through when it opens back up, obviously, if the funding comes through this week. So go on there and fill out the information the best you can. And again, we're encouraging everybody to do that, regardless of the structure of your company or if you're a sole proprietor, and put in the information you have. Again, Social Security number is a tax ID number, is an EIN. Whatever you have, put it in and apply. There are some screenings on the credit side of the house. If credit score. I'm getting some calls about credit score and things of that nature. So there is a threshold to meet on the credit score, but outside of that, so here's the other part, because part of this up to $10,000 is basically a grant. So that's why we're telling folks, go ahead and apply and see what you get, because the math is working out to about $1,000 per employee, and that's going to be forgiven up to $10,000. So you should go through the exercise is the short answer again.
Okay. Yeah, that's, I think, the part that has a lot of people a little, fuzzy, because if some small business owners hire contractors. And so it's, well, I don't even consider myself an employee. Do I qualify? Does my staff qualify? Is that the same thing as PPP? But before we jump into PPP, I'd like you to tell people exactly what EIDL stands for.
So it's economic injury disaster loans, and we refer to that as EIDL. But
EIDL, nice.
So basically, to qualify, you have to be operating, you should have been in business January 31. And the good news is, what we've been told is, if at first maybe you don't succeed, you can try again. So you can reapply somewhere down the road. I forget the timetable on that, but assuming you weren't kicked out or denied. So the program runs out in September, I believe. But the good thing about that is there's no personal guarantee up to a $200,000 loan, and really there's no collateral really up to $25,000. So if you there's really nowhere on the application on the website to say, hey, I need $250K or I need $35K. It's based on the information you put in there, because it is geared for working capital. Mm-hmm. There's, again, no algorithm, so a person is supposed to look at cash flow, and believe it or not, SBA is a cash flow lender, so they're going to look at and pre-qualify your client based on the information they put in. And the good news is up to $10,000 of that is forgiven.
Now, what happens?
Again, word on the street is apply.
Yeah. Now, what happens if I was thinking about the application part? So you said that they should just continue to apply. Like if they applied for it and didn't get it, they should apply again. How do they know? Like, is the SBA sending emails to people letting them know they didn't apply? I mean, they didn't qualify?
So I guess maybe I generalized too much there. So if you have not heard from, if you've not gotten any correspondence, and I know there's a lot of people that have not gotten any correspondence because, again, the systems are overwhelmed. But if you've not heard, it doesn't hurt anything to go back and reapply.
Okay.
So they're supposedly have systems in place to catch that. Okay. So here's another tidbit, that 50% of all the small businesses in the United States have applied for this. So when you think about that, there's just a lot of people that can fall into this category and hopefully benefit from it. So pay attention to the emails. I know there's some slow in coming, but you should have correspondence from the disaster people to find out where you are in the system, how much you qualified for. And then here's the other thing: you can deny it, because again, it is a loan, so you can deny that. Or I had a gentleman call the other day. He said, "Well, I received an approval for over $200K, but I'm not really interested in putting up my real estate." Well, then you say, "Well, thank you, but I'll just take whatever the magic number is to and we've been told 200,000 under 200,000, you don't have to pledge real estate. So he was gonna, you know, counter back and say, well, I don't need the 239, say, if that's the number. I only need 189.
Okay.
And that's totally possible to do. Okay.
Now, what if and I've got clients. So 2019 was a weird year for a lot of people, right?
Sure.
And so some people in 2018, their tax situation may look one way, and then 2019 it may look another way. So if they're filing based on their 2018 taxes and then they get their 2019 taxes, should they go ahead and apply again, or should they just submit their most recent tax returns?
Well, I would say the most recent documentation is what you should supply, because the borrower is attesting to the accuracy of that. So I think that's really the best practice, is to say, here's the last tax return, here's the last information I have that I can point to, and then, you know, then it's also expenses on top of that, and so a lot of that should, and I'm not a tax person, so a lot of that should be captured in the tax returns. I think documentation would be a key to justifying the information you're putting in there. So whatever you have is what I would go with, 2018 or 19.
Okay. And then, but what my question specifically is, if someone has turned in their information based on 2018 and they get let's say 2019 just came hot off the press from their CPA today, do they now take their 2019 taxes and turn those in as supporting documentation?
So there's if you have not been decisioned yet, what I've been telling folks to do is just call the number or email the disaster customer service email and request, or whenever you get the correspondence, you would request that information be added to. Now, that's what we've been telling folks. Nobody has told me not to say that. I would say call the 800 number and say, I think I've understated, in this case, I guess, I've understated, you know, the numbers, so I would like to amend or abridge that, and just see what they say, because I'm not real sure, once you've been assigned a loan number, on the idle side, I'm thinking you're probably locked in on those numbers, and you might not be able to amend or you know, change the information. But that's a call to the 800 number. I'm sorry, I can't answer it any better than that.
The 800 number is gold right now. I'm gonna sell it.
It is. It's a lot. You're gonna hold on a long time before you get a person, and then those people are coming up to speed. So some of the information is a little bit scattered that you get there. But that's a valid question. I have more documentation. What do I do if I'm still in process? Can I amend the numbers in the application? There should be a way to do that, we're told.
Okay, and you know, this week there was a lot of controversy about Ruth's Chris and Shake Shack and certain larger corporations qualifying for small business lending for the what did you call it, EIDL program. Who qualifies? Who is supposed to qualify for it?
Yeah, I think most of that's on the PPP side.
Okay, so the PPP is for everyone? So
the PPP side is for, well, it is for everyone. If you have a tax ID number, whether you're for-profit or not, yes, you apply for that through your banker. So that's not a direct loan through the SBA. That's through your banking relationship. So that's where I saw those big names you just listed. Okay. You know, kind of questioning why they got the money instead of, you know, the mom and pop restaurant on Main Street. So the 500 employee number that you keep seeing is a standard benchmark for size determination in the SBA world. If you're a manufacturer, say, it's just kind of a a good benchmark to throw out there. But there are other size standards that you can see on our website, and it's all driven by your NAICS code, North American Industries something code,
SIC code.
classification systems. Didn't mean to make light of that, but so based on your NAICS code on your industry specific, there's a tool you can find on our website to put in your industry, your NAICS code, and it will tell you if you qualify to be small or not, which basically it's a big window to be honest about it, but that's the tool we use. That's the benchmarks we use. So people get hung up on the 500 employee head count, but that's not the only determining factor.
Right. So it's based on their NAICS code or SIC code, I think. Yeah. That's what they used to call it, was SIC codes. So what the PPP program, since we're kind of knee deep in this, the PPP is the Paycheck Protection Program?
Correct. That's right. And the idea there is the spirit of the law was to keep employees hired, keep them around and keep them off the unemployment rolls, I suppose. But it's to cover the employee salary and your comp, all your bennies and all that, up to $100,000 on the salary side, and then utilities and other expenses. The idea is to keep the doors open if we weren't in a shelter-in-place situation, but keep the doors open for 8 weeks and keep your people employed till we work through the pandemic.
Now, what about the small business owners who are, let's say they do have an EIN number, but they don't have, say, employees per se. If they have a bunch of contractors, but they have an office or different locations, whether it's inventory, things like that. What loan should that person apply for?
So the idea is both, that you should apply for both. And here's the caveat there, just while we're on that subject, is working capital from the EIDL includes payroll costs. So the idea there is to keep excellent records so you don't commingle these funds on the payroll piece, and then you'll be okay. The idea is that you can use both buckets of money if you don't use both buckets of money for payroll. Does that make sense? So you need to use the idle money for other things other than payroll, and you'll be fine on the PPP side. And the PPP side is basically heavily going to be forgiven if you use it strictly for payroll purposes. So it's all about record keeping. It's all about keeping the people on your payroll and keeping them paid. And the 8 weeks is the key point there. And again, you got to be in business it was on February 15th. So there's a little gap here that I've talked to people about. So if I bought a company on February 14th, I wasn't qualified. But if I bought one on February 16th, I'm qualified, but I still don't have good data, right? So there's hopefully in the new law, or we're waiting on guidance on how to handle those folks. So there's no way that the lawmakers could figure out every scenario. But what's come to light in the past couple of weeks is if I just bought or I just started my company, right around that date that makes me qualified, I don't really have good information. So they're still working on guidance to tell us what to do with those folks. But the idea is to apply for both. The PPP side is the spirit of that is to make sure the payroll is met and the people are still on the rolls of your company.
Okay, so small business owners with employees or without employees, or if you have contractors, you should be applying for the EIDL and the PPP.
Right, and if you're a contractor, then you basically qualify to get that as well. So that's the idea there is if you're a contractor, you go apply for your own monies. And again, these loans are through your bank on the PPP side, and they're 100% guaranteed by SBA. So and there's a mechanism that is yet to be developed on how you, the client, go back to the bank after these 8 weeks are up and say, okay, I want my forgiveness now. What we're being told is about 75% of this loan amount will be forgiven if you follow the rules, keep it to payroll and things like that, and you do some good, do your good documentation. So,
okay.
So that's and at the end of the day, both of these programs, whatever the residual is, whatever's left, I mean, both of them are loans, right? So you want to make sure you understand that whatever is left over after the forgiveness piece in each program is going to be a loan that you're going to have to repay. So you want to make sure you calculate that in the future cash flow. But there's still a lot of moving pieces and parts, particularly with the PPP program, because the bankers are just now funding a lot of these, and so the back side of the house has to be figured out on the mechanics of how to get the guarantee perfected from us, how to get these things off the books and all that. But that's really for just the banker, that audience, and so the mechanics of that are still being worked out. But the idea is apply through your banking relationship. And here's a little tidbit for you. And the reason we say go to where you have a banking relationship is because all the compliance stuff is going to be on there. They're already going to have that on file for you. So if you bank at ABC Bank and decide to go to XYZ Bank has to go through some compliance, a compliance process to figure out. We call it in the banking world, know your customer. So there's compliance things that have to be done for number one, you to prove who you are. So the moral of that story is, if you jump banks and go, well, I haven't got a call back from ABC Bank, and I go to XYZ may slow you down a couple, 3 days because they have to start from square one, okay, with the compliance stuff. So just a little thing to be aware of if you think you just want to jump from another bank to another institution that no one knows you, I guess.
And this is one of those deals where I think it's important. I've been touting this for a couple of years now, that people have to have a relationship with a banker or someone at the bank where they deposit their money, because you never know when times get hard or when things get squirrely. You need to know that there's somebody at your bank that's going to look out for you. And I think people are really realizing that right now, including the banks, including the banks,
They need to know who Emma is when Emma calls, and if that relationship's already established, then you have more. Your success ratio is much improved, I would think.
Now, are there any other programs besides the PPP and the EIDL for business owners?
So I think we mentioned early on the bridge loan. So there's a way to apply at your banking relationship to say, hey, I need a bridge loan until I get. Now this is tied to the disaster piece. So this is tied to the EIDL piece.
Okay.
So a lot of bankers have been so caught up in the sheer volume of the PPP program that it doesn't get a lot of airtime on the bridge loan. But there is a vehicle out there to allow the bankers to say, well, up to $25,000 is available in a bridge loan, and then the idea is the EIDL loan, the EIDL loan will pay that off whenever that's funded. But there's not the mechanics of that. Each bank is going to underwrite that differently. And again, based on just the bandwidth that everybody's having to put towards the PPP program, you may not even get a call back on anybody interested in that. But there is a vehicle out there on the bridge loan to get up to $25,000, and then the idea is that is paid back when you get your advance on the idle.
Now, if someone has gotten I think it was if someone has said that through their bank, they say that they're approved, but now the SBA or, the program has run out of money, now what happens?
So that's a good question, and there's a lot of people in that category. So that's a call back to your banker, because again, a lot of the banks had their own portals, they had their own internal process mapped out to get the necessary information. So they're working through their own process on their side before they actually transfer that file, if you will, to the SBA people. So if you've gotten an application number, that could be a couple of things. It could be that your bank acknowledges that your file is, I guess, pretty well complete, and they're going to assign you an application number to track you by. The other thing is on the SBA side, just about the time the money ran out, there were application numbers and loan numbers, application numbers flying back and forth, but that's only half of the story from us. If the bank was assigned a loan number from SBA, then the process is complete. But if you just have an application number, then there's another step that has to be completed, and there's no way of us knowing where in the systems you are other than just calling back to your banker and saying, where am I? What do I need to do next? Do you need anything from me? What additional information do you need? What is your process? But if you ask them, do I have an SBA loan number, and the answer is affirmative, then basically you can count your lucky stars that you actually are moving on toward signing the loan docs.
Okay, so if you went through your bank, have an application number, you're still in the process, but if the bank has actually issued you a loan number, you will be receiving the funds, or you'll have to wait until this next iteration.
That's correct. That's my understanding. So if there's a loan number been assigned to the bank, and that's how the loans are now being funded. So there are still banks, even though the funding ran out a few days ago, and we're still waiting on the new batch to come, the new law to be signed, and all the negotiations there. That's how the funds are being dispersed now, because they've actually been given a loan number from our side of the house, and they can actually get the client in to sign the loan docs and get the check.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. So I have some questions from some people.
Okay.
This is someone from the city that lives within the city of Atlanta in Brookhaven. Okay, and this kind of piggybacks on what we just discussed. Okay, if you submitted a PPP application at the bank, excuse me, and the bank acknowledged receipt, how can you follow up on funding? And it's a two-part question, actually, so we'll stop there. So is that, go ahead.
So the only way to do that is to contact your bank. Unfortunately, there's no way for us to see the back of the house on their process to see where you are, if it's shown pending or whatever. The only avenue to check that is to call your banker.
Okay. Now the other part of the question is, this person is also they have few businesses, but they're also a sole proprietor, and they have a vacation rental that they rent through VRBO, which is like an Airbnb.
Right.
And they also use Airbnb, and they want to know, again, how do they apply for the EIDL when renting out a Airbnb or VRBO? You're not required to have an EIN number.
Yeah. So again, I think you use your personal social security number on that one, and that should get you on through.
Okay.
to see what happens, because your expenses are still rolling, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even though you may not have a salary, you've got expenses that are still accumulating. So use the personal Social Security number, and I think that's the right answer.
And I'm not sure if you'll have the answer for this. I have not looked up the new bill and the provision, so I'm kind of in the dark with this because, again, this is like drinking from a fire hose. Information is coming at us so fast. But the viewer says that there was previously not a provision in the bill, the CARES Act, to allow people who own or you do Airbnb to receive any monies. So is that something new that's happening?
I don't know a specific carve out for that. I'll have to go back and research that. Maybe we can get that answered offline. But I don't think there's I don't think there's a carve out for that.
Okay.
So we'll have to pursue that a little bit further. The new bill, nobody knows what's coming, and hopefully they'll repair some of the questions and some of the misinformation. But there'll be caveats and things that nobody. We'll just have to wait and see what comes out. I mean, they're basically saying, from information I've seen in the media, nothing from SBA proper, but from the media, I'm seeing another 60 billion with a B for the EIDL program, and then another 320 billion for the PPP program. Remember, the original PPP program was 349 billion. And here's another little stat for you, just while it's on my mind, but 74% of the loans that were made in the PPP program were less than $150,000. So that to me says, there are those big companies that were getting funding, but the $150,000 loans implies to me that a lot of the mom and pops were getting the funding, and I hope that turns out to be right, because it's over 1.5 million businesses got all that money.
Okay, so here's another question for you from another person, and this is segueing into the small business. So let's see, small businesses being considered 500 employees or less. This left it open for large revenue companies to apply for the SBA loans and potentially deplete the funds. Will there be additional resources specifically for mom and pop Main Street businesses that were not able to participate in PPP or EIDL?
I sure hope so. And again, I think a lot of my phone has rang from not only small business owners, but it's also rang from the staff of the local congressman's office too. So they're gathering that data. I got to think that they're gonna. I got to think that the intent, the spirit of the law, is to make sure that Main Street got the money. So I have to think that they're going to make sure of that, perhaps in the next funding cycle. That I don't know this, but there could be other stipulations. For example, we're hearing there may be a carve out for just the rural areas in the country. So to make sure that Main Street does get the funding they need. So we'll just have to wait and see what the new law says. So.
All right, so here's another question. Are there any types of businesses or scenarios where it doesn't make sense to apply for a small business loan?
So there are other pools of money at the local level that there's no way that I'm going to know, but I have heard through all of this that, for example, the city of Atlanta, the economic development folks had a pool of money for just their businesses, and it had some pretty attractive financing attached to that. I know there are other economic development arms in our specific communities that are doing the same thing. So it doesn't hurt to kind of Google that, if you will, or ask around in your local communities if there's a local option for some funding as well, because that would be in the two cases that I mentioned, those were more attractive in my view than actually getting an SBA loan. But you've got to make sure you meet the criteria and make sure that the pool doesn't run out by the time you get there. But there are other local funds that you might find as an alternative for you there. And then there's also, let's don't forget about the fintech lenders, the online lenders. Again, you have to really read the fine print there, but that's obviously an option for folks as well.
Okay, and then the last question I have, let's see. Okay, I think somebody's just trying to figure out how to get the money. Do we resubmit applications? How are they deciding who gets the money? How are they defining employees?
So again, if you're talking about the EIDLPs, that's going to be based on, well, all of it is going to be based on the information that you provide to either the disaster people or to your local bank. So I know there's still a lot of confusion about that. The idea is to have the best documentation that you can to back you up and make your case, because at the end of the day, you're the one signing off on the fact that that information is true and accurate. So the head count, the dollar amounts you're spending, all those kind of things are kind of falling back on each borrower to make sure to provide that information to make the calculation. So that's the best answer I can give on that. Okay. It's basically the more documentation you have, I think the better you are at that. Now on the idle side, as we've already said, I'm not real sure how there's no algorithm to figure that out. They're basing it on cash flow, basing on information you put in the system, and they're coming back with a loan offering. So whereas with the PPP, you put this information in, it's basically 2.5 times that number. So there's a little bit clearer math. And then also, just here's a good best practice too. Check the Treasury website and our website, because there are updates to all of this being published as soon as somebody figures out, oh, that was a problem or whatever. So here's the fix for that, or here's how you calculate that. So there's a lot of information on the Treasury website and our website on how to hopefully clear up a lot of questions if you have, and chances are if you can find the answer there, you know it's correct and accurate. Okay, just a couple of other tidbits. Just Georgia alone, I think we're in the top 10 as far as getting this money out on the street. There's like $9.5 billion, something like 48,000 businesses took advantage of this in Georgia. On $9.5
billion or $9.5
billion with a B for the dollar amount, and 48,000 businesses in Georgia took advantage of the PPP program.
Okay.
So again, we have great lenders, we have smart business owners, and let's just keep it going. And I'm happy to come back and maybe clear up some other questions at a later time, and keep our fingers crossed on the new funding, and hopefully it'll clear up some of these obstacles as well. Okay.
All righty. Yes, definitely. Jeff, this was wonderful. Again, for anyone who is listening and or watching, you can contact the SBA Disaster Relief. That number is 1-800-659-2955. And also make sure that you check out the, I believe it's going to be treasury.gov. And you can also go to sba.gov. I would go there frequently to look at any changes or to see what's going on, to see how you actually get the monies that you need. So